Everyone, thanks for having me here today at PyBay2020. Tadeh Hakopian. About me, I work in architecture. I like to code. I like to use Python in my day-to-day work since it saves me a lot of time and it's pretty easy to use. And I also encourage others who are not familiar with the program to use it for the same reason. Problem is, a lot of people might struggle to learn it because they're not familiar with code or editing in text. So the message I want to send everybody here today who are a lot more savvy than the average person when it comes to code is to make learning code accessible for anyone. There's been a lot of talk at PyBay and in tech sector in general about making it more accessible to code and expand the ability for people to learn to code. So that's kind of one of the themes in this talk, is to expand the circle on who uses Python and coding languages in general. I think it's one of the most progressive tools I've ever used, and I've seen so much benefit of it. I myself don't have a tech background or a coding background, but I learned to use it over time. And I think if you want to expand that circle and make other people more comfortable learning the language, then you have to think out of the box when it comes to teaching. Sometimes people get intimidated by coding. Sometimes they get intimidated by the complications they might see in coding. So to avoid that, you want to make the first step non-intimidating. Emphasize the graphics for creatives who are not comfortable in that format. Sorry guys, if I wasn't following along here, I apologize. I was looking at the wrong screen. Sorry. Yeah, so avoid the intimidation factor. Emphasize visuals. And with the text editor code, some people might think it's a little too much at once. They might, who are not comfortable with code, might step back and shock of it. So what you want to do is have a visual analog to what you're teaching in code, like for example, Pythagorean theorem, which has multiple ways of showing the proof graphically and geometrically, algebraically. They can then kind of tag to the coding language. And let's see if I can get this working. Sorry guys. And you can also use the animate tools here. Excuse me, the coding animate to edit the code, and code blocks that can show the graphic examples to the users of how things come together. Run that. Oop. Apologies. And things like PyFlow, which uses graphical examples in coding. We'll switch share screen to here. Okay, that's a little better. I think you guys can see that now. And use graphical methods to share the code. And the breakthrough for me was just this thing. This is how I kind of came through coding, was to use visual scripting to make my coding realities, my progress a little better in coding. I use a program called Revit day-to-day to make 3D models and designs in architecture. And there's a resource out there called Dynamo, which lets you use things like Visual Code and Python scripting to accelerate that. And for me, that opened up doors to use the Revit API with the Python script in Dynamo to do more than I would normally have done, a little more fluid design that can then link a design to the code and the script. And I always thought that Python as a language would be always a fun thing to do, is to learn with a fun paradigm. And I think you do have to link the code to the graphics. So that said, what you can do is to use diagrams in your documentation training content, be comfortable stepping out of text code and use graphics and other visuals to communicate code, and contribute to open source projects that promote coding learning like Scratch, Python Tutor, PyFlow, and Dynamo. And to expand the circle for those who are maybe not as familiar with coding as others, and to give them new ways and new avenues to learn code. And that's it for me. Thank you so much. Sorry for the flubs in the presentation. Unfortunately, I had to switch between monitors on the fly there. I really apologize for that. But yeah, I'm going to share the deck with everybody later on so you guys can see the whole thing.